Rammed earth homes sound like something left behind by history. A building method tied to old civilizations, desert settlements, remote compounds, and a world that built with what was already underfoot. And yet, this is exactly why the idea feels so strange right now. At a time when housing is getting more expensive, energy bills keep rising, and people are searching for homes that feel stronger, quieter, and less dependent on constant mechanical support, rammed earth is coming back into the conversation. That sounds surprising at first, because on paper, this method should feel outdated. You are literally compressing layers of earth into thick walls. No futuristic shell, no shiny system. No high-tech image, just soil, formwork, pressure, and time. But that simplicity is also what makes it so powerful. And once people understand what those walls actually do, the comeback stops looking nostalgic and starts looking logical. A rammed earth wall is made by taking a carefully selected mixture of soil, sand, clay, and sometimes gravel, placing it into temporary forms, and compacting it layer by layer until it becomes dense and solid. What you get is not a fragile dirt structure. You get a heavy, monolithic wall with real presence, real mass, and real durability. The finished surface often shows natural horizontal layers, giving the house a look that feels both raw and refined at the same time. It does not try to imitate nature. It is nature, shaped into architecture. And that changes how people react to it. Because most viewers first assume the same thing. If it is made from earth, it must be weak, it must crumble in rain, it must be a niche idea for off-grid dreamers. It must be one of those beautiful concepts that looks great in photos but fails in real life. But that assumption falls apart very quickly. Properly built rammed earth has been used for centuries in demanding climates. Some rammed earth structures have survived for generations, not because they were trendy, because they worked. This is where the comeback becomes interesting. Rammed earth is not returning because people suddenly want ancient aesthetics. It is returning because modern housing has exposed some very modern problems. Many newer homes are built fast, but fast often comes with trade-offs. Thin walls, heavy HVAC dependence, noise transfer, temperature swings. Materials layered together in complicated assemblies that rely on membranes, sealants, finishes, and systems all working perfectly. A lot of modern construction performs well when everything is installed exactly right. But many people are starting to ask a different question now. What if the wall itself did more of the work? That question leads directly to rammed earth. Its appeal starts with the wall, but it does not end there. Rammed earth walls are thick, dense, and visually permanent. They give a home a sense of stability that many lightweight builds simply do not. When people walk into one of these homes, the reaction is often immediate. The house feels grounded, quiet, protected. The walls do not feel like a surface. They feel like structure. Like shelter in the deepest sense of the word. In an era where so much housing feels optimized for speed and resale photos, that kind of physical presence stands out. And buyers are noticing. Architects are noticing too. So are people interested in low-energy design, passive comfort, fire resistance, durability, and materials that feel honest rather than manufactured into artificial perfection? Rammed earth fits into several modern desires at once. It feels sustainable. It feels timeless. It looks expensive, even when the raw material itself can be relatively basic. And perhaps most importantly, it offers a form of performance that does not depend entirely on gadgets, upgrades, or complex maintenance. That last point matters more than it first appears. A lot of housing innovation today is framed around adding more. Smarter thermostats, better air systems, new insulation packages, more efficient windows, more layers, more products. More components to optimize the same basic box. Rammed earth points in a different direction. It suggests that part of the answer may not be more technology stacked into the house, but a more intelligent wall from the beginning. A wall with mass. A wall with thermal behavior. A wall that changes the indoor experience before any machine even turns on. That is one reason it is coming back. Not everywhere, not at full scale, but enough to matter. There is also the visual side of it, and that should not be underestimated. Rammed earth homes photograph beautifully, but their appeal goes beyond style. The layered texture gives every wall a natural variation that manufactured finishes struggle to reproduce. No two walls look exactly the same. The house feels custom before any furniture goes in. It carries a sense of craft, permanence, and restraint. For homeowners, tired of generic interiors and disposable materials, that has real emotional pull. It feels rare because it is rare. And rarity, when attached to something functional, becomes even more attractive. Still, The most important part of the comeback is not beauty, it is credibility. This is not an invented trend with a clever marketing package. It is not an internet fantasy. It is a proven method being reconsidered by a housing market that is slowly realizing that older building logic may still solve current problems. That is what gives Rammed Earth its unusual power as a topic. It is both ancient and modern at the same time. It looks unconventional, yet it answers very practical questions. How do you build a home that feels solid? How do you reduce temperature swings? How do you create comfort that begins with the structure itself? How do you build something that does not feel temporary? Rammed Earth offers one possible answer, and that is where the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. If this material has history, durability, beauty, and practical performance, why is it still so uncommon? Why are more people talking about it, admiring it, and searching for it, while so few neighborhoods actually build with it? Why does something that appears so rational still live at the edges of the housing world? This is what makes the comeback feel incomplete. Interest is growing, awareness is growing, the admiration is real, but mainstream adoption still has not followed. And that tells you something important. The story of Rammed Earth is not just about what it is about what modern housing rewards, what it overlooks, and what it makes difficult even when the idea itself makes sense. Because the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes that Rammed Earth is not rare because people hate it. In many cases, people love it the moment they understand it. It is rare for more complicated reasons. And once you see the real strengths behind these homes, the comeback starts to make even more sense. Not as a design fad, not as a romantic throwback, but as a serious response to a housing market that has become efficient in some ways and strangely fragile in others. Because the real advantage of Rammed Earth is not just that it looks different, it is that it behaves differently. The strongest case for Rammed Earth is not nostalgia, it is performance. Once the wall is built, everything about the house begins to behave differently. Not dramatically in the way a gadget promises dramatic change, but quietly, steadily, and in ways that shape daily life. This is the part many people miss when they first hear about Rammed Earth. They focus on the material because it looks unusual. They focus on the texture because it photographs well. But the real value is not the look. The real value is what those thick, dense walls do over time. Start with temperature. Most modern homes are designed to resist outdoor conditions by creating a light shell and then relying on insulation, sealed assemblies, and mechanical systems to keep the interior comfortable. That can work very well, but it often creates a home that feels reactive. When the weather changes quickly, the house changes quickly. Rooms heat up fast, they cool down fast. Air systems cycle on and off to correct the swings. Comfort becomes something the equipment has to maintain every hour of the day. Rammed Earth works from a different principle. Its walls have mass, a lot of it, and that mass allows the house to absorb heat, store it, and release it slowly. Instead of letting outdoor temperatures rush straight into the living space, the wall slows the entire process down. During a hot day, the walls can absorb heat and reduce how quickly the interior warms up. When outdoor temperatures fall, the stored heat moves back more gradually. In the right climate, and with the right design, that creates something many modern homes struggle to deliver: stability. That sounds like a small advantage. It is not. Because what many people want from a home is not simply the ability to become warm or cool. They want the home to stay comfortable without constant correction. They want fewer sharp indoor swings between afternoon heat and nighttime chill. They want spaces that feel calm rather than mechanically managed. Rammed Earth, when done properly, moves in that direction. It helps flatten the peaks, it reduces the shocks. It can make a house feel more settled hour by hour, not just season by season. Imagine walking into your home after the sun has been hitting the exterior for hours. In many lightweight houses, you feel it immediately. The heat has accumulated fast. The air feels trapped. The cooling system has been working to catch up. In a Rammed Earth home, the experience can feel different. The temperature feels more anchored. The space feels thicker, calmer, less exposed to what is happening outside. The house does not seem to panic in response to the weather. It resists it with mass. That is one of the biggest hidden advantages. Another is sound. Modern homes often look solid on the outside, while feeling acoustically thin on the inside. Street noise travels in. Conversations carry from room to room. Mechanical systems hum through walls and ceilings. That can wear people down more than they realize. Noise is one of those background problems that often gets accepted because it is so common. But once you enter a quieter home, the difference becomes hard to forget. Rammed earth helps here too. Those same dense walls that slow temperature transfer also reduce sound transfer. Exterior noise can feel more distant. Interior rooms can feel more separated and protected. The house takes on a quieter character, and that changes the emotional experience of living in it. A quieter house often feels more expensive, more private, and more restful, even before you measure anything. It feels deliberate. It feels composed. In a world full of alerts, traffic, humming equipment, and constant background disturbance, silence has become its own luxury. Then there is durability. This is where rammed earth stops sounding like an alternative and starts sounding like a challenge to modern assumptions. Many people are used to homes that require constant attention. Paint ages. Siding fails. Assemblies need patching. Layers need inspection. Small problems travel through complex systems. Maintenance becomes part of the long-term cost of ownership. And often, that cost is not just money. It is time, stress, and the slow realization that a house can feel more fragile than it first appeared. Rammed earth offers a different impression. A properly designed and protected rammed earth structure can last a very long time. The wall itself is massive, direct, and not pretending to be something it is not. There is less illusion in the construction. Less dependence on thin decorative skins to create a sense of permanence. When people talk about rammed earth homes feeling timeless, they are not just referring to the look. They are responding to the physical logic of the material. Thick earthen walls do not suggest temporary thinking. They suggest endurance. That matters for homeowners who are tired of homes built around short cycles of replacement. It also matters psychologically. A durable house changes the way people relate to it. It feels less disposable, less optimized for a quick sell, and more built for a long stay. That emotional shift is not easy to quantify, but it is real. Many people are no longer looking only for square footage or visual style. They are looking for solidity. They want a house that feels like it was built to remain. Rammed earth also aligns with a growing desire for lower maintenance living, though this requires realism. It is not maintenance-free. No house is. Details still matter. Moisture management still matters. Roof overhangs, drainage, foundations, and climate-appropriate design all matter. But when the core wall assembly itself is strong and stable, the house can avoid some of the layered vulnerability that more complex systems introduce. That is appealing to homeowners who want fewer weak points hidden behind finishes. And then there is fire resistance, which has become harder to ignore in many regions. A dense earthen wall does not behave like combustible framing or exposed synthetic materials. For buyers thinking about resilience, especially in areas where climate risk is becoming part of the housing conversation, that characteristic adds another layer of appeal. Rammed earth begins to look less like a design preference and more like a strategic choice. Not for everyone, but clearly for some. The environmental side matters too, though it should be discussed carefully. Rammed earth is often attractive because it can use abundant natural material and reduce reliance on heavily processed finishes. The walls feel honest. The structure feels direct. For many homeowners, that is part of the appeal. They are not only buying performance, they are buying material integrity. They like the idea that the home feels connected to the site rather than assembled from a long chain of industrial layers. In an age of rising interest in natural building, that has powerful emotional and cultural weight. Still, the most persuasive advantage may be the simplest one. Comfort. Not showroom comfort, not staged comfort, lived comfort. The feeling that a house holds steady, that the walls are doing real work, that the indoor climate is less frantic, that the space is quiet enough to think. That the structure itself contributes to peace instead of forcing the systems to manufacture it all day long. Rammed earth homes can create that kind of experience, and once someone understands that, the appeal becomes much easier to understand. This is where modern housing starts to look strangely limited. Many homes add more products to compensate for weaknesses that begin in the basic structure. Better insulation, because the wall is thin. Better systems because the envelope changes too quickly. More acoustic treatment because noise travels too easily. More upgrades because the default condition is not enough. Rammed earth does not solve every problem, and it is not automatically superior in every setting. But it does expose something important. Sometimes the smartest improvement is not another product layered onto the house. Sometimes it is a better wall. A wall that stores heat, a wall that softens sound, a wall that feels permanent, a wall that changes the indoor experience before the thermostat even reacts. That is why rammed earth keeps drawing attention. It does not merely offer a different style of home, it offers a different relationship between the building and the environment. It does not fight comfort into existence every hour with machinery alone. It begins by building comfort into the structure. And that is exactly why the next question becomes unavoidable. If the advantages are this strong, why is it still so rare? This is the part that surprises people most. Rammed earth sounds like it should be a cheaper, simpler alternative. The material comes from the ground. The walls look direct. The method feels almost too basic to be expensive. So the natural assumption is that if more people are not building this way, it must be because they do not understand it yet. But the truth is less romantic and far more revealing. Rammed earth is not rare because it lacks value. It is rare because the modern housing system is built around speed, standardization, financing logic, and labor patterns that do not naturally favor it. That is the real answer. Start with the biggest misunderstanding of all. Cheap material does not automatically mean cheap house. Yes, the raw earth itself can be relatively low cost compared with highly processed building materials. That part is real. But the wall is not just dirt piled into place. A rammed earth wall requires soil testing, proper mix design, engineering, formwork, compaction equipment, careful sequencing, and a crew that understands how to execute the process correctly. If the proportions are wrong, the performance changes. If moisture is handled badly, risk increases. If the compaction is inconsistent, the wall quality suffers. In other words, the material may sound simple, but the construction is not casual. And that changes the economics fast. A conventional wall system fits neatly into an industry built for repetition. Framing crews know the process, suppliers know the products, inspectors know what they are looking at, developers know the timeline. Banks understand the model. Appraisers recognize the comps. Almost every part of the system has been trained to move that kind of house forward quickly and predictably. Rammed earth enters that system like a foreign language. It can absolutely be done, but it often requires more explanation, more coordination, and more patience at every stage. That alone filters out a large share of projects. Then comes labor. This is one of the biggest barriers, and one of the least visible from the outside. Rammed earth is heavily dependent on execution quality. The wall is structure, finish, and visual statement, all at once. There is less room to hide mistakes behind layers of drywall, cladding, trim, or surface treatment. That means the crew needs real skill, and skilled crews are limited in many markets. Even where interest is growing, the number of builders with deep rammed earth experience remains small. When expertise is scarce, cost rises. Scheduling becomes harder. Risk feels higher. What looked simple in theory becomes specialized in practice. And once something becomes specialized, it leaves the mass market behind very quickly. Developers know this. Most large-scale housing is not built around the question, what is the most durable and thermally stable wall we could create? It is built around a different question. What can we approve, finance, construct, and sell at the fastest reliable pace? That is not cynicism. It is the operating logic of the industry. Speed matters. Predictability matters. Labor availability matters. Material supply chains matter. Rammed earth often asks the system to slow down and adapt. The industry usually prefers the reverse. This is where the contradiction becomes clear. Rammed earth may perform well for the homeowner, but it does not always perform well for the production model. And production models shape what becomes normal. Time is another issue. A conventional home can move through familiar sequences that the industry has refined over decades. Rammed earth construction can require additional design coordination, mock-ups, engineering review, soil decisions, and execution steps that many teams are not used to handling. Even when the final product is excellent, the path to get there may feel slower and less predictable. For custom homeowners planning a long-term build, that may be acceptable. For builders trying to turn projects efficiently, it often is not. Then there is code compliance and approvals. This barrier varies by region, but it is real enough to matter. When a building official sees a standard wall assembly, there is already a broad framework for review. With rammed earth, especially in areas where it is uncommon, more documentation may be needed. Engineering may need to be more explicit. Questions may arise earlier. Some jurisdictions are familiar with it. ICAST Act of 2030. Others are not. And when uncertainty enters the approval process, many clients and builders simply step away. Not because the method fails, but because uncertainty itself has a cost. Financing creates another obstacle. Banks and lenders tend to feel most comfortable when a project looks familiar, comparable, and easy to value. Rammed earth homes do not always fit that pattern. There may be fewer comparable sales. Appraisers may struggle to place the home within a standard framework. Lenders may view the project as more custom, more unusual, and therefore more complicated. That does not make financing impossible. It makes it harder. and anything that becomes harder to finance automatically becomes rarer in the marketplace. The same problem follows at resale. A rare home can attract serious admiration, but rarity cuts both ways. Some buyers see uniqueness and quality. Others see uncertainty. They wonder about maintenance, insurance, repairs, future resale, and whether local contractors understand the structure. Even if those concerns are exaggerated, they affect market behavior. Housing is emotional, but it is also financial. Buyers often want confidence more than they want originality. Rammed Earth asks them to embrace both. Climate and location also matter more than enthusiasts sometimes admit. Rammed Earth is not a universal answer for every site, every weather pattern, and every design goal. It tends to make the most sense when the climate, detailing, and architectural strategy align with the strengths of thermal mass. In the wrong context, the advantages may weaken or require additional layers and strategies that reduce the purity of the concept. That does not invalidate the method. It simply means that the best version of Rammed Earth is often highly intentional. And intentional building tends to stay niche because it does not scale as easily as generic construction. Perception may be the most underestimated barrier of all. For many people, Earth still sounds temporary, primitive, or risky. They hear the word and imagine fragility, not engineering. They imagine mud, not precision. They imagine a romantic experiment, not a serious residence. This perception gap matters because housing decisions are not made on technical performance alone. They are shaped by instinct, status, habit, and what people believe a real house is supposed to look like. Rammed Earth has to overcome that mental resistance before it can even enter the practical conversation. And perception is hard to change at scale. It is much easier to sell people a familiar wall with upgraded finishes than an unfamiliar wall that may actually perform better in certain ways. Familiarity wins more often than it should. That is true across housing, and Rammed Earth is a perfect example of it. So the rarity of Rammed Earth is not really a verdict on the material itself. It is a verdict on the system around it. A system built for rapid throughput, standardized lending, known labor, repeatable inspections, predictable resale language, and construction methods that fit neatly inside all of those expectations. Rammed Earth can succeed inside that world, but it rarely does so effortlessly. It often needs a committed homeowner, an informed design team, a capable builder, a tolerant timeline, and a budget that can absorb uncertainty in exchange for long-term value. That is a much narrower path than most mainstream housing takes. And yet, that narrow path is exactly why interest keeps growing. Because once people understand the benefits, the rarity starts to look less like proof of weakness and more like evidence of mismatch. The method and the market are not perfectly aligned. The wall makes sense. The system does not always make room for it. That is the real tension at the center of Rammed Earth. It is not failing because it does not work. It stays rare because modern housing rewards what is easiest to repeat, easiest to finance, easiest to approve, and easiest to explain. Rammed Earth is none of those things. It asks more from the process, even when it gives more back in the final result. So the real question is no longer whether Rammed Earth works. The real question is who is willing to build against the grain of the system in order to get what it does best. Because for the right person, in the right place, with the right priorities, that trade-off may make complete sense. By now, the picture is clearer. Rammed Earth is not rare because it lacks strengths. It is rare because its strengths do not line up neatly with what the mainstream housing market rewards. That distinction matters, because once people understand it, they can stop asking the wrong question. Instead of asking whether Rammed Earth is good or bad in the abstract, the better question is much more practical. Who is this actually for? That is where the decision becomes useful. For the right homeowner, Rammed Earth can make enormous sense, not because it is trendy and not because it promises perfection, but because it aligns with a very specific set of priorities. If someone wants a house that feels solid, stable, quiet, and deeply tied to climate-responsive design, Rammed Earth deserves serious consideration. If they are thinking in decades rather than quick resale cycles, it becomes even more compelling. This is not a building method that shines brightest in short-term logic. It shines when the owner plans to live with the results for a long time. That long-term mindset is one of the biggest dividing lines. A person building a forever home, or at least a long-hold home, is much more likely to appreciate what Rammed Earth offers. Thermal stability matters more when you experience it year after year. Durability matters more when you think in generations instead of short ownership windows. Lower maintenance potential matters more when you are imagining life in the house over time, not just getting it built and moving on. Rammed Earth tends to reward patience, commitment, and clarity of purpose. It does not reward rushed decision-making. Climate is another major factor. Rammed earth often makes the most sense in regions where thermal mass can truly work in the building's favor, especially when daily temperature swings allow the wall to absorb and release heat in a useful rhythm. In hot, dry climates, this can be especially powerful. The house can stay more stable through the day, softening the extremes and reducing reliance on constant mechanical correction. In those settings, rammed earth can move from being an interesting design choice to being a very rational performance strategy. That does not mean other climates are impossible. It means the design must become more careful, more contextual, and sometimes more hybrid. A homeowner who is realistic about that is in a much better position than someone who treats rammed earth as a universal miracle. The best candidates are the ones who understand that the material is strong, but not magic. They want a solution grounded in place, not a fantasy copied from the internet. Custom home clients are often the strongest fit. Why? Because custom building already assumes more decisions, more coordination, and more personalization. That environment gives rammed earth a better chance. The owner is usually more engaged. The design team can shape the house around the material rather than forcing the material into a generic template. There is more room to think about orientation, wall thickness, drainage, roof overhangs, openings, and the experience of living inside the finished structure. Rammed earth rewards that level of intention. It benefits from owners who care not just about appearance, but about how the house actually works. People drawn to low-energy living are also natural candidates. Not because rammed earth automatically makes a home ultra-cheap to operate in every scenario, but because it fits a broader philosophy. It asks the building itself to do more. It shifts some of the performance burden away from equipment and into the structure. That appeals to homeowners who are tired of solving every comfort problem with another device, another upgrade, or another system layered on top of a weak basic shell. They want the house to begin with intelligence. Rammed earth can support that goal very well. The same goes for buyers who care deeply about material honesty. Some homeowners are simply done with surfaces that imitate quality without delivering it. They want real texture, real mass, and a house that feels physically credible. Rammed earth has unusual strength in that area. It does not need to fake permanence. It does not need a decorative layer to imply substance. It arrives with substance built in. For the right buyer, that is not a minor aesthetic preference. It is central to the entire idea of home. But just as important is knowing who should probably avoid it. If someone needs speed, rammed earth may not be the right path. If the priority is moving quickly from design to completion with the fewest variables possible, conventional systems will usually have the advantage. The same goes for buyers with very tight budgets and little room for uncertainty. Even when rammed earth makes sense in principle, the realities of labor, engineering, approvals, and specialized execution can create cost pressure that some projects simply cannot absorb. In those cases, admiration for the method is not enough. The numbers and process still have to work. It may also be a poor fit for people who want maximum simplicity in financing and resale. A highly custom rammed earth home can absolutely attract interest, but it may not fit cleanly into familiar market categories. Buyers who know they may need to sell quickly, refinance easily, or prioritize standard appraisal logic should think carefully about that. A house can be excellent and still be harder to place inside a conventional financial framework. That tension does not disappear just because the architecture is impressive. Urban infill sites can present another challenge. Tight lots, constrained access, complex neighborhoods, and highly standardized local construction patterns do not always pair naturally with rammed earth. It can still be done, but the friction often increases. In many urban situations, the method loses some of the practical simplicity people initially imagine. The best rammed earth projects often benefit from enough space and enough design freedom to let the material do what it does best. This brings us to cost, which deserves direct honesty. Rammed earth is often misunderstood as a low-cost house because the raw ingredient sounds inexpensive. But the more accurate way to think about it is this: it can be low processing, high mass, long-term value construction, yet still come with meaningful upfront cost. In many markets, it may cost more than standard framing, especially once skilled labor, engineering, formwork, and schedule realities are added. That does not make it a bad investment. It just means the payoff is usually not in the headline material price. The payoff is in durability, comfort, distinctiveness, thermal performance, and the experience of living in the result. So the right comparison is not dirt versus drywall. The right comparison is short-term efficiency versus long-term quality, fast build versus stable build, mainstream resale logic versus deeply intentional ownership, immediate convenience versus structural character that keeps giving back over time. That is why rammed earth remains both appealing and limited. It makes sense for people who know what they value, who are prepared to build with intention, and who are willing to accept more complexity up front in exchange for a very different kind of home. It makes less sense for those who need speed, certainty, broad market conformity, or a process that every contractor, lender, and inspector can navigate without hesitation. And that final distinction may be the most important lesson of all. The smartest homes are not always the easiest ones to build. The most durable ideas are not always the most common. And the housing market does not always reward what performs best over the longest horizon. Often, it rewards what moves fastest, scales easiest, and feels most familiar. Rammed earth pushes against that logic. That is why it stays rare, but it is also why it keeps coming back. Because every time housing becomes more expensive, more mechanical, more fragile, or more disconnected from place, people start looking again at methods that offer something deeper, not a gimmick, not a fantasy, a different kind of answer. And for some homeowners, that answer may be exactly right. So here is the real choice at the center of this story. If you were building for the next 30 years, would you choose the faster and more familiar path? Or would you accept a harder build process for a home that feels quieter, stronger, and more permanent every single day you live in it?